Caulk is not an acceptable repair for drywall. Drywall repairs should be made using drywall compound, which is also known as joint compound. The specific steps for repairing drywall will vary depending on the size and severity of the damage. However, the general process is as follows. Firstly, clean the damaged area and remove any loose debris. Secondly, apply a thin layer of drywall compound over the damaged area. Thirdly, let the drywall compound dry completely. Fourthly, sand the repaired area smooth. Fifthly, if necessary, apply a second coat of drywall compound. Sixthly, let the drywall compound dry completely. Seventhly, sand the repaired area smooth again. Finally, prime and paint the repaired area. To elaborate further, let's consider different scenarios and the specifics involved in each. For small nail holes or screw holes, the process is quite straightforward. First, clear away any loose material around the hole. Then, using a putty knife, apply a small amount of drywall compound to fill the hole. Make sure to overfill the hole slightly, creating a small mound. Allow the compound to dry completely, which usually takes several hours, but it's best to wait overnight. Once dry, use a sanding sponge or fine grit sandpaper to sand the area smooth, blending it with the surrounding wall. Be careful not to sand too aggressively, as this can damage the surrounding paint or drywall. After sanding, wipe away any dust with a damp cloth. Finally, prime the patched area and paint it to match the rest of the wall. For larger holes, such as those caused by a doorknob or other impact, the repair process is a bit more involved. First, you'll need to cut away any loose or damaged drywall around the hole, creating a clean square or rectangular opening. Next, measure the opening and cut a new piece of drywall to fit snugly into the hole. It's important that the new piece of drywall is the same thickness as the existing wall. Before inserting the new drywall, you'll need to install some backing to support it. This can be done by screwing or gluing small pieces of wood, cold furring strips, to the inside of the existing drywall around the perimeter of the hole. The furring strip should be thick enough to provide a solid surface for the new drywall to rest on. Once the backing is in place, insert the new drywall patch and secure it to the furring strips with drywall screws. Make sure the screws are driven in far enough to dimple the surface of the drywall slightly, but not so far that they tear the paper facing. Next, apply drywall tape over the seams between the new drywall and the existing wall. This tape helps to reinforce the joint and prevent cracking. There are two main types of drywall tape: paper tape and mesh tape. Paper tape is stronger and provides a smoother finish, but it requires embedding in a layer of drywall compound. Mesh tape is easier to use, as it's self-adhesive and doesn't require embedding, but it's not as strong and can sometimes result in a slightly textured finish. If using paper tape, apply a thin layer of drywall compound over the seam, then press the tape into the compound, smoothing it out with a putty knife. If using mesh tape, simply apply the tape over the seam. Once the tape is in place, apply several coats of drywall compound over the tape, feathering the edges out onto the surrounding wall. Allow each coat to dry completely before applying the next. After the final coat has dried, sand the area smooth, blending it with the surrounding wall. Again, be careful not to sand too aggressively. Finally, prime the patched area and paint it to match the rest of the wall. For cracks in drywall, the repair process is slightly different. First, you'll need to widen the crack slightly with a utility knife, creating a small V-shaped groove. This helps the drywall compound to adhere better and prevents the crack from reappearing. Next, remove any loose debris from the crack. Then apply a thin layer of drywall compound to fill the crack, pressing it in firmly with a putty knife. Allow the compound to dry completely. Once dry, sand the area smooth, blending it with the surrounding wall. If the crack is deep or wide, you may need to apply a second coat of drywall compound. After sanding, wipe away any dust with a damp cloth. Finally, prime the patched area and paint it to match the rest of the wall. When selecting drywall compound, there are several different types to choose from. All-purpose joint compound is a good choice for most repairs, as it can be used for taping, topping, and filling. Lightweight joint compound is easier to sand and is a good choice for topping coats. Quick setting joint compound dries much faster than regular joint compound, which can be useful for small repairs where you don't want to wait overnight for the compound to dry. However, it's also more difficult to work with as it sets up very quickly. When sanding drywall compound, it's important to wear a dust mask to protect your lungs from the fine dust particles. You should also cover any furniture or belongings in the area to prevent them from getting dusty. To minimize dust, you can use a wet sanding sponge instead of sandpaper. A wet sanding sponge will still sand the drywall compound smooth, but it will trap the dust particles in the water. When painting the repaired area, it's important to use a primer that is compatible with drywall. A good primer will help the paint to adhere better and will prevent the drywall compound from absorbing too much paint. You should also use a paint that is the same color and sheen as the surrounding wall. If you're not sure what color or sheen to use, you can take a small piece of the wall to a paint store and have them match it. In addition to these general tips, there are also some specific techniques that can be used to achieve a professional-looking drywall repair. For example, when applying drywall tape, it's important to embed the tape in a thin layer of drywall compound to prevent air bubbles from forming underneath. You can also use a corner trowel to create sharp, clean corners when repairing drywall in corners. When sanding drywall compound, it's important to use a light touch and to sand in a circular motion to avoid creating flat spots. You can also use a sanding block to help keep the sandpaper flat and even. If you're not comfortable repairing drywall yourself, you can always hire a professional drywall contractor to do the job for you. A professional contractor will have the experience and expertise to repair drywall quickly and efficiently, and they will be able to ensure that the repair is done properly. Remember that proper preparation is key to a successful drywall repair. Taking the time to clean the area, remove any loose debris, and apply the drywall compound correctly will help ensure that your repair is strong, durable, and aesthetically pleasing. Also, be patient. Drywall compound needs time to dry properly, and rushing the process can lead to cracks or other problems. By following these tips and techniques, you can achieve professional-looking drywall repairs that will last for years to come. And remember, never use caulk as a substitute for drywall compound. Caulk is not designed for this purpose and will not provide the same level of strength, durability, or finish. Always use drywall compound for drywall repairs. By understanding the materials and processes involved, and by taking your time and paying attention to detail, you can successfully repair drywall damage and restore your walls to their original condition.